Today, 77 WABC is celebrating the Lunar New Year.
Now, live from Studio 77 in the heart of New York City, it's the Lunar New Year Roundtable, celebrating the Year of the Rabbit. Now, here's Dominic Carter.
And good day, everyone, and what a fantastic turnout as we celebrate the Lunar New Year. And we have to begin in terms of, I want you to give yourselves a round of applause for all of you folks that have turned out here to be with us today. What a tremendous showing. And I will get to this tremendous panel in just a second, but I have to begin by thanking the two people that have made today possible. And they are two people that are single-handedly bringing the city of New York together, all the different races. And that is Margot Katzimatidis, one of our station owners. Mrs. Katzimatidis, where are you? Just please come up and wave to the crowd so they can all see you, please. Mrs. Katzimatidis, thank you for your leadership. And Mrs. Katzimatidis, one of our station owners here at WABC, and of course, her husband, who also makes everything possible here at WABC, the Mr. John Katzimatidis. So, Mr. Katzimatidis, thank you for all that you do on behalf of the city of New York and our country. You are a remarkable, remarkable American. I want you to begin with opening statements, please.
Well, the reason we do this at WABC is the most powerful radio station on the East Coast, and one of the most powerful. And New York City is the greatest city. I consider it the greatest city in the world, and it has the biggest diversity. If you look at the United Nations, we have people in New York from 185, speak 185 different languages. And the Asian community in the last 10 years has grown exponentially. I think it went from, and you know the numbers better than I do, from like 10% to 17% in New York City alone, but we'll have better numbers for you. And I respect the Asian community because a lot of people are envious because the Asian community, they're hard workers and they take care of their kids. They want their children to be better than them. I went to Brooklyn Tech High School and in the 1960s, and there was a big Asian community in Brooklyn Tech High School. And then there were people saying, why are there so many Asians? And Harvard was saying, why are there so many Asians? And you know what I say to them? Well, they work harder, and that's why more spaces should be available. And there should not be any prejudice because they work harder. And we respect the Asian community, and we use this opportunity to celebrate Lunar New Year. Now we get to the hard stuff. What's the difference between Lunar New Year and Chinese New Year? And I understand on my radio show yesterday, we had a gentleman on from the Chinese Chamber of Commerce, and he says, was it Korea that has a different, it's the Year of the Rabbit.
Yes, sir.
Yes. But one of the other countries has a different year.
The cat.
The Year of the Cat. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, yeah, and the other thing I said this morning on Sid's show, when 7 o'clock this morning to kick off the celebration at WABC, was the Year of the Rabbit. A rabbit is a beautiful, docile animal. So we hope that 2023, we have peace in the world. And I said, the Chinese population goes back 14,000 years. Maybe you guys know better than we do which years are peace and which years are not. Dominic, back to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Katzimatidis. Give him a round of applause, please. And so, as you can see, we have a A-list panel here for you today, and I'm so glad to be part of it. Let's start to my right. We have a history maker here in terms of Inspector Sylvester G. from the NYPD. He is the commanding officer, the top guy of the Highway Patrol Department for New York City Police Department. Give him a round of applause, please.
Thank you, Don. Thank you, Mr. Katz, for the invitation. Glad to be here.
And we are honored that you are here with us. To my far left, we have another history maker, if you will, Assemblyman Lester Chang, who is an elected official for the 49th Assembly District. Assemblyman, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the host, Kat Matidis, that you supported our community. And as immigrant, we all share the same value with you, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you.
And we also have Mr. Edward Kucha, who is an immigration lawyer, and he's very active in the Asian community. Thank you for being here.
Thank you as well. I have the great good fortune to be married to an Asian woman. I live in Chinatown, live in Little Italy, and we do a lot of work in the community. So it's very happy to be here.
And your wife is here today?
She is indeed.
Where is she?
She is. Where is she?
Where is she? Where is your
You
wife?
see?
Oh, she's somewhere around here. She's somewhere around here.
There you go.
Okay, so I want to ask an open-ended question, and I guess I'll start with you, Inspector. What is your definition, your personal definition? Mr. Katzimatidis just alluded to this, to the Lunar New Year, and how do you celebrate it in your family?
Well, I came from a town, a city, kind of similar to New York, Shanghai, when I was 14 years old. And the Lunar New Year is extremely important to all the Asian. Mr. Katz asked about what's the difference. I think within the Asian culture, the Chinese refer to as the Chinese New Year, oftentimes other culture referred to as the Lunar New Year because we base out the calendars differently. But other than that, it's a great family gathering to celebrate the New Year, to honor our ancestor. So it's extremely important to us.
Fair enough. And Assemblyman?
Yes, I'm born in Lower East Side, Eldred Street, back in the 60s. So I remember Chinatown was very small, like a small ghetto. And when Chinese New Year comes about, it's a big family celebration, not only our family, but for amongst the Chinese community. That's where family association all meet together. They have their own crisis, they have their own battles. But when Chinese New Year comes, they all come together and celebrate and have a feast on that. That's the only area that we have that remember our culture, because we've been immigrated for about a little more than 150 years with the gold rush. And in New York, so it's a very small immigration at that time. And also there was a exclusion act that they excluded specifically Asian Chinese from coming to this country exclusively for about 60 years, 70 years, until 1943, in the middle of World War II, before they lifted that. And so our community hasn't grown as exponentially until the Exclusion Act was released. And then we grew back in the 60s. It was a small town. So yes, our Chinese New Year is your Thanksgiving. That's how we equate. But
you celebrated over 15 days.
Yes, because each has its own significance. But the first couple of days is the most important.
The first couple of days, and it started just a few days ago on the 22nd, I believe. Yes.
Actually, the eve of.
Okay,
the Saturday,
eve of.
The eve
okay.
of.
Okay. Attorney Kucha.
Oh, my. Well, Chinese New Year or Lunar New Year means a lot to us and my family. My wife is ethnically Chinese. She was born in Malaysia. So we've got this interesting mix of Italian family mixed with an Asian family, and we celebrate absolutely everything. And it's a wonderful, wonderful gathering. And indeed, it is New Year's Eve that we celebrate, because that's when the family comes together. So our family comes from all over, and we celebrate with lots of good food.
Mr. Katzimatidis just alluded to this, and Mr. Katzimatidis, I guess I start with you on this one. The issues before the community, you just alluded to it. We've seen divisions here in New York. How do we stop this? What's going on?
Well, first of all, I was with the governor yesterday morning, and it's very important that we have law and order. You said you were originally from Singapore.
Shanghai.
Shanghai. I know, where was it? Singapore that has the most law and order of anything?
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
I mean, we need law and order in our city. And I said to the governor, I said, why, I don't care if somebody steals one bottle of water because they're hungry or some bread. But people that are violent criminals, repeat violent criminals, that commit violent crimes all the time, then those people should not live among society. Put them away. If somebody steals because they're hungry, I can understand. And right now, we have to straighten out New York City, the greatest city in the world. And I think the number one problem is we got to take care of the violent criminals. We got to take care of the mentally ill. And you know what happened? There used to be 28,000 people that were mentally ill in New York. And somewhere, some administration, they threw them out of the hospitals because they didn't want to pay. And they put them into the streets of New York and made them, instead, they changed their category from mentally ill to homeless. And then we had the vets that came over from the wars. And some of them need help. Some of them have some mental illness because of the wars. And they have to be helped. Except they threw them in the streets and they became homeless. I think before we worry about opening up our borders, and I'm an immigrant. I came here when I was an immigrant. I was born in Greece. But before we take care of the rest of the world, and when my father came here, his two brothers had to sign that if he didn't pay the rent, they would pay it. And we have to take care of our people that are here now and take care of the American citizens before we worry about taking care of Central America or South America or Africa. Send them food if they need it. We're generous people. But don't open up the borders and just let them in. We need law and order, and we need common sense. President Clinton was a good friend of mine. He still is a friend of mine. And you know what? For New Year's wish, I sent them an email. Oh, no, I sent them a text. And I said, for New Year's, I hope common sense prevails in 2023. And he came back to me and says, yes, that is the number one. Common sense has to prevail because extreme right or extreme left is crazy. Extremism is no good. People that want common sense are the people in the middle.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Katmatidis. I'm also a military veteran, 24 years, and serving in Afghanistan myself, so I understand some of those veterans' issues, and I do have PTSD.
Wait. Stop for 1 second. You served in the military
Yes.
in Afghanistan.
Yes,
And unfortunately, though, you're dealing with PTSD.
that's correct.
So you have served this country well, your country.
That's correct. Our country.
Our country. Our country.
Our country. And with my leader Barkley up in Albany, and we know that cashless bail is one of those big issues, and we are willing to work with the other side of the aisles, and just to make some course correction. We cannot repeal it, but we'll make some adjustment to help us out, especially serialized perpetrator. And our optics are terrible for low-level petty larceny that hasn't been addressed, have not been in a crime stat in a big way. If we really incorporate low-level petty larceny, I think the chart will blow out of the sky. Just a simple shoplifting, simple assault, simple like that, that's not being advertised. But those are optics that we see day to day, fair beating, jumping. So if we can nip that in the bud, and I really wanted to have punishment as community service. Why having make community service as part of the punishment? If the crime is not high enough to go to jail, if they don't have any money to pay the fines, let's give them a broom and a brush and work for the public good. That's what I advocate for.
And it's a great idea. Inspector, I want you to please, you're a top commander with the NYPD, and I want you to, if it's possible, take off that hat, take off that uniform, and talk as an Asian American. As we're celebrating the Lunar New Year, what are the issues before the community, I guess pros and cons?
Well, so after COVID, the Asian community at large felt threatened. My family as well. I have 3 children, and oftentimes they have to take public transportation.
How old are your kids?
I have, my oldest is 22, middle 19, the youngest 18. So they're being taunted at, cursed, calling different names. So as a parent, as an Asian American, it's very unsettling time, especially after COVID.
Commander, wait, I want to make sure I got this right. You are one of the top commanders of the largest police force in the country. And you're telling me that your children with this wave, and it breaks my heart every time that we have to report on it on WABC, when a member of the Asian American community, for no reason at all, has been attacked, has been punched. And it's been one of the mandates that Mr. Catsimatidis has made sure that we stay on top of in terms of reporting to the public and what's going on. But you're telling me, Commander, that your children, and you're a top commander, have feel threatened and have come under attack?
Yes, sir. Unfortunately, that, police department, we do the best we can, and we are doing every possible way to help the public safe, just like Mr. Katz says. However, there are certain laws that needs to be looked at, and all the other players or partners within the criminal justice system, we have to come to the table to work something out. Of course, there are people that need our help, but at the same time, those repeat offenders, violent offenders, they also have to be held accountable.
Counselor, I mean, it just breaks my heart, Commander, for what I'm glad that you're being honest with us, right. and I'm so thankful that Mr. Catsimatidis, again, I mean, when you look at yourself, folks, look, I don't think there's an empty seat here at all, and people are standing, and this is all because of Mr. Catsimatidis' commitment to the community, to your community, to my community, to our community. Counselor, do you want to follow up on that before we move on?
Absolutely. The community of, Chinatown, Little Italy, is under attack. It's under attack for so many reasons. To start, we've got the ridiculous situation with the mega jail, the Chinatown jail that's being demolished, and then this ridiculous structure that's going to be built in its stead, which is going to devastate the Chinatown and Little Italy communities. We've got the massive oversaturation of homeless shelters in Chinatown, 10, 11 homeless shelters that are planned to be put into Chinatown with 3 additional methadone clinics. It's insane. The closure of Park Row, which suffocates Chinatown from the south. We've got massive garbage. We've got crime. We've got Asian hate. We've got it's a horrifying situation. We need tourism in Chinatown. We need tourism in Little Italy. And these situations, they're driving the tourists away. I live there. I'm afraid to go out at night. I'm afraid to have my wife go out at night.
Why are you afraid?
It's quiet. Okay, I'm a New Yorker. I grew up here. And when I was young, I would go to Chinatown, Little Italy, 10, 11, 12, midnight, 1 in the morning. 2. It was alive. It was happening. You get your cappuccino, your cannoli, you get your dim sum, you get your noodles. You go down Chinatown now, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. It's empty. It's empty. This is crazy. What are we doing? If you are Chinese, if you're Italian, you've got to do something. We've got to do something to save these communities. This is our home. I'm Italian. I live in Little Italy. I think I'm the only Italian that still lives there. This is nuts. It's crazy. Chinatown's going to be the same thing. They're not going to be any Chinese people living in Chinatown in 20 years. We're going to lose these amazing communities if we don't do something to fight against this.
But why do you say that? And I understand that's projection, and I know that you hope and pray that doesn't happen.
Absolutely.
But why do you say there won't be any Chinese people living there in 20 years?
Oh, Lord, it's happening now. Go down to East Broadway. Chinatown used to be massive, used to sprawl. East Broadway on the far east, all the way over to Mott Street and keep going, Canal Center Street. East Broadway's a ghost town. Everybody's gone. All the buildings are empty. The stores are for rent. 88 East Broadway Mall used to be this amazing mall full of people. It's empty. There are junkies shooting up in the stairwells. We find dead bodies there all the time. It's coming into Canal Street in Chinatown. It's horrifying what's happening. The city of New York, the state of New York, the United States of America has abandoned these two communities. Little Italy, the businesses are closing. It's shrinking more and more. Chinatown is shrinking more and more. We've got to do something.
The census do hold that locally. It's been New York City, Chinatown has been losing its population, and right now it's mostly is elderly right now, and that's an unfortunate fact right now. So they're spreading out to Queens and Brooklyn, and that's why I benefited from the growth of it, and that's how I got elected. How we can, and on top of it, congestion pricing. If that gets its effect, Chinatown will not just die; it'll be dead. And if Chinatown died, it would affect my community in Brooklyn as well as in Flushing, because we all interact with businesses, services, medical services, all interact. If one of them dies, it affects both of us. So we need to. You're right. The only solution I can see is tourism, and they have to inject some sort of money for either museum, arch, or something like that to have the tourism back.
But are tourists going to come if we build the largest jail in the world in the Chinatown, Little Italy area? This is crazy.
It's crazy.
Would you build the largest
It's
jail
crazy.
next to the Eiffel
We
Tower?
got
Of course
Rikers
not.
Island.
Yes.
Why?
Sure.
What political mischief did they want to close Rikers Island? That's the stupidest thing in the world. You know, that's where the criminals belong, and that's what it is. It's just. I think the Rikers Island thing is going to reverse itself.
I hope so.
I just hope so. I spoke to Mayor Adams, and I said, it's and what they should do. Rikers Island is so big. I proposed to Mayor Adams, let's build hospitals on Rikers Island for the mentally ill. Okay, because we want to take care of the mentally ill. We want to take care of the bad criminals. If they need help, they need help. But let's take care of our people first before we worry about South America. That's all I'm saying.
And I think that's what we're all saying, Mr. Catsimatidis.
Yep.
I think everybody on this panel dittos exactly what you just said. We are about to wrap this panel up, but I will be remiss if I don't. Well, there are a couple of things I want to say. I'm listening to everyone on the panel, and it is my job. It is my job to be the pulse of the communities and know what's going on in the communities. That's what I'm employed for here at WABC. And I'm sitting here in shock as I'm listening to issues that you're bringing up that I know very little about. And so why is it that we don't know more about the issues of the Asian American community?
We didn't know either.
No,
Okay.
we're humble as a group. We don't make noise, and that's what perhaps the other community view of us is weak and take advantage of us. And we're growing politically. We're growing in our numbers and in our culture. We accept it.
17% of New York City, and you have to have a bigger voice.
We have to have a bigger stick and a bigger drum to beat on.
You got WABC. Anytime you can call Dominic Carter for his show. Anytime you can call me for my show.
And Mr. Catsimatidis means that. So I've got to wrap this up, but I would be remiss if because it's very sad in terms of what happened in California. The Lunar New Year celebration, Monterey Park, 11 people killed. 11 people killed. Is there any way we can avoid this, or your reactions, I guess. And Inspector, this is right up your alley as a top commander of the NYPD. And I got to tell you on a personal note that I'm very proud, I really am, that an Asian American is in the top ranks of the NYPD.
Thank you.
And so, because I believe in diversity.
27 years?
27 years.
27 years NYPD. How many years in
24
the
years.
Army?
24 years in the Navy.
In the Navy.
24
a
years.
Navy man.
Yes.
Wow.
Our president of WABC, Chad Lopez. I don't know. Are you here, Chad? He's a Navy man.
Wow.
I'll talk with him. But starts the sea story.
So, Monterey Park, just your reactions, and I mean, in particular, that it was a something that was positive, a lunar celebration, and people lost their innocent people lost their lives.
So it's extremely tragic event that took place in California. Two, not only one. It seems like these type of mass shootings are occurring more often. And the society is becoming numb or normalizing these behavior. It's very saddening. Coming from a law enforcement perspective, that we have to work with our federal partners to approach a common sense approach, like Mr. Cass stated, to make it better. To anyone who have mental issues, they need to get their treatment, not to be let onto the street. So it's really a big issue that has to be working with the local level, state level, and the federal level.
Yep.
The last thing I'm going to say, I said to the governor, because the commissioner was on my show, Commissioner Sewell, and she says there's 3,400 violent criminals. And I say to all the politicians, and you repeat what I'm going to say to them. I said to the governor, I said, who deserves to be taken care of? 8.5 million New Yorkers or 3,400 criminals? All right? Answer that question.
That's it. Yeah, that's it.
Final thoughts around here on this side, gentlemen. Before I
Yeah,
go back to
let's
Mr.
not
Cousins?
build the largest jail in the world to take care of those 3,000 criminals. Let's spend it on us. How's that?
Amen.
Final thoughts is really education on our basic level, elementary, how to decrease
Education.
hate, how to decrease, maybe that should be a core curriculum
When
in
they
school.
wanted to get rid of Brooklyn Tech and Stuyvesant under the past administration, I said to them, why? Why don't you build another great school, build the son of Brooklyn Tech, the son of Stuyvesant, and the son of Bronx Science, instead of tearing down the great schools?
Well, I want to close this way before I go to Mr. Catsimatidis for closing comments. I'm just curious, was it tough when you came here from China as a 14-year-old young man?
If I tell you otherwise, I would be lying. Transition was quite difficult.
But look at you now.
Yes.
But look at you now.
It's a great country.
Please
so.
give them all a round of applause, folks. I want to ask our audience here, jam-packed for this event, what is and I want you to say it loudly, what is the common way to say Happy Lunar New Year? Say it loud now, say it loud. One more time. Okay, I'm gonna count it down. 3, 2, 1.
新年快乐!
And same to you. Thank you, folks, for being here. Mr. Catsimatidis, I want you to close. Do you have any closing comments?
No, I've said it all.
Okay.
WABC is dedicated to making sure that the Chinese community, the Asian community, gets the right, what their rights are in our country, because we're all men, all women are created equal.
We are so honored that you folks are here with us as we look at and acknowledge this joyous occasion and this special celebration. I'm Dominic Carter. In a moment, I'll introduce this great panel from a businessman to a community activist to the president of Queens College, who is the first Asian American president ever at Queens College. So we'll get to that in just a second. But I want you folks to understand what we do at WABC, and I am so glad and honored that the president of our company, the man that hired me, I want you to hear from him. His name is Chad Lopez. He is the president, and basically he runs everything for Red Apple Media, and he can explain to you why the company is doing these types of events. Mr. Lopez.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming. One of the things that when John and Margot bought the station, WABC, their vision was always to do things for the communities, organizations in New York City and around the country as well. And these days are really important to us because it gives us the opportunity to connect with communities and find out their challenges, and no better place to try to help solve those challenges on WABC with our listeners, right? So I'm really proud this day, Lunar New Year, is really an important one to me. And they're all important, equally important, but it's a little special to me because my parents are originally from Venezuelan descent, but my grandmother is 100% Chinese, so I'm a quarter Chinese. So,
Wow.
so
Wow.
yeah,
Wow.
thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Lopez. And again, so as he just indicated, you have the Catsimatidis, and then the man that makes everything possible here, that makes this run, is Chad Lopez. And I thank him tremendously for his leadership. Now to our panel. Let me start to my right. We have Stan Chen. Stan attended, I believe, Boston College, but also Harvard University. And he owns a recycling company. Am I correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you for joining us. To my left, we have community activist Jackie Wong. Jackie is a strong leader in the community, and I saved perhaps the best for last, Mr. Frank Wu, who is the president of Queens College, the actual president. Yeah. And folks, I want you to think about this. We're going to do the activities and the celebration, but I want you to think about this. Sometimes priorities are expressed by actions. And so you have the president of Red Apple Media here with you for this community event. And trust me, there's no place that he would rather be than right here. You have the president of Queens College, who's running an institution post-COVID, where he needs to be on campus, but he's here with you for this celebration. So please give everybody a round of applause. And so, Mr. President, I'll start with you. We're only going to be about 15 minutes. Mr. President, the Lunar New Year, what does it mean to you?
Well, this is a time of celebration, but it's also this year been a time of tragedy. You know, during the pandemic, we saw so much violence. It's unbelievable. And at first, people would say to me, it's just random. But then we saw these viral videos, and it turned out it was a pattern. People of Asian descent walking down the street, minding their own business.
Yes.
Not looking for trouble, were shouted at. And that's how it starts. Go back to where you came from. You're making us sick, and racial slurs. And then it escalates from there. People got shoved to the ground, not just shoved to the ground, kicked in the head, sent to the hospital in critical condition in comas, stabbed, shot in Atlanta, mass murder, eight of them killed. Why? Not because these individuals were carrying a disease, but because of the color of their skin, the texture of their hair, the shape of their eyes, because the attackers looked at them and said, this is your fault. Meaning it was about race, it's about ethnicity, and it was mistaken identity twice over. So some people have said, and I won't quarrel about this, that this COVID-19 came from Wuhan, China. But people were attacked. Some were Korean, some were Filipino, some were Burmese. Some people who were Chicano got attacked because they looked Asian. And they were U.S. citizens. So these are not folks from Wuhan, China. And that's not right. If you went and identified a random person and just beat them up, that wouldn't be right, blaming them. But my point is, this hatred doesn't know boundaries, right? So when people get riled up and angry, they just look at you and they think, I got to take this out on someone. Scapegoating. I'm mad about the pandemic, mad about this quarantine, the risks, those are all real. But it's not my fault. It's not the fault of some random person who happens to be Asian American, but that's what happened. Coming out of this with the Lunar New Year, everyone wanted to celebrate at last and gather again on the most important holiday for so many East Asian cultures. And yet there was more violence. Now, Turns out, not hate crimes, but this is a community that's been so traumatized. So many elderly people, including elderly women especially, are still staying in their apartments. They won't go out to buy groceries because they're worried if they ride the subway, someone is going to try to kill them. That's wrong.
So, and thank you for that, Mr. President. Would you two agree? And then, Mr. Lopez, what I'm going to come back to you on is why have you made it a mandate here at WABC to cover these types of attacks that have occurred against Asian Americans? But do you agree that this lunar celebration is somewhat bittersweet?
I cannot agree with President Wu anymore because discrimination is really something we are facing right now. And this discrimination is not just racial discrimination, but also institutional discrimination, Dominic. Like, if just 1 week before Lunar New Year, the Proud Boys, the far-right group, they came to Chinatown. They yell at the people, go back to China. And that's just 1 week before the Lunar New Year. You think about like how the bad feeling it brings to our community. And also, if you look at, we feel like the government also intensified this kind of discrimination by doing institutional discrimination themselves. Edward Kuchia mentioned earlier, they treat Chinatown like a dumping ground. They dump all the shelters, 3 jails, drug rehabs in our neighborhood. Right now, we already have 8 existing shelters, but they are pushing 2 more shelters into our neighborhood. I don't know if you recall, just last year, also around New Year time, there was a lady, her name is Christina Yulan Lee. She was stabbed 40 times by a homeless person whose address was in a nearby shelter and killed that person. And I just spoke with the landlord of that building yesterday. There was another homeless person who tried to break in. I mean, you think about all these threat and public safety risk that the city bring to our neighborhood. How do we deal with it? But then I also want to mention that this kind of struggle is also similar in certain Black and brown neighborhoods. If you look at Harlem, if you look at Bronx, if you look at Crown Heights, East New York, we all face the same problem. They're all treating these specific neighborhoods as a dumping ground. And when we try to fight oversaturation in our neighborhoods, right, you know what? There are people calling us NIMBY. But if you look at these people, look into their background, most of them are people who live in Park Slope or Upper West Side who do not have any kind of facilities in their neighborhood. So I feel like that kind of discrimination is very it's a hidden discrimination. It is a subtle discrimination by certain specific kind of people, and that's something we have to fight against.
And the woman you referred to, what comes to mind, and this is a separate incident, is the Asian American woman that was pushed in front of the train.
Right.
Minding her business, and she's dead. She's been dead almost a year now. And then the situation you're referring to, the suspect happened to be African American. You didn't say it. I'm going to say it. And he was homeless, and she was entering her building, minding her business, and she went into the entrance of her building, and apparently she thought the door had closed, but it had not. And he followed in right behind her and then killed her, stabbed her 40 times, and tried to hide from the NYPD in the bathtub of her apartment after he killed her where she lives. And so I turn to you now, and do you concur that, that this year's celebration is somewhat bittersweet when you look at California as well?
Absolutely. I think it's a tragedy, obviously, with anti-Asian crime really up 300% over the last year because of the pandemic. My mom, who still lives in Forest Hills, I'm actually a product of New York City. I was born in Elmhurst, grew up in the suburbs, but basically, growing up in the 70s, coming into Chinatown to get our weekly groceries. And when Flushing really developed as an enclave for the cultural Taiwanese, really going to Flushing every weekend. So I understand really growing up Asian, especially Taiwanese/Chinese in the New York City area. And I do think it's a tragedy that anti-Asian crime has gone up because obviously look, the pandemic definitely didn't help, and the previous administration really didn't help with all of these sayings like, the Kung flu, really, basically placing blame on a specific ethnic group, right? But myself as a business leader, I really want to look above that, carry on. Basically make sure that, I applaud the efforts of our business leaders, our elected representatives, especially this past year, really making sure the Lunar New Year was on the school calendar, really highlighting the cultural stories that we are so proud of, and making sure the rest of the community / the rest of the nation really understands and really appreciates the Asian culture. So I think, look, it's with all of these things, with my mom really still living there, really lamenting about public transportation isn't safe anymore, right? Especially for an Asian, especially for an older Asian woman. So it's really tragic that basically we walk around with this kind of fear, but we also as community leaders, as business leaders, we also have to really make sure we're the face of courage, make sure we find opportunities to reach out and reach across the aisle as well, right? And making sure that, hey, for me, I have a recycling company. And I'm very involved in sustainability and technology and international affairs. I also serve on the Manhattan Solid Waste Advisory Board, really pushing out recycling and composting programs around the city. So it's you have to make sure as a leader that you're out there, you're out in public, making sure that, hey, you know what? When we associate Asians or Asian community leaders, it's not. That story needs to be told in terms of anti-Asian, and these kind of hate crimes, but also highlight the stories of what it means to be successful, and maybe you can emulate Asians. Granted, I was a product of the model minority, hey, let's study until my mom was the other day, she said, I live right across the street from this guy, and I see this Asian kid, and his light is up until 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning studying. And my son right now is in high school. I have him in private school in Westchester. But, I'm proud of the heritage. I'm proud of the values that my parents gave to me, but we want to make sure we bring this to the community and to the future generations.
Mr. President, I know I can tell you want to respond, but before you do so, because we only have 5 minutes left here because we have other events and the food and so on, but I wanted to go to Chad Lopez that runs everything here at WABC. And I want you to explain to the community, to the people that are here, Mr. Lopez, why you have issued a mandate that we are to cover the Asian American community as strong as any other community, as strong as the Black community, as strong as the white community, why this has been so important to you.
Yeah, it's been really important to WABC, I will say. John and Margot, like I said, they bought this station to identify with those communities and organizations, to make an impact in those communities. And when you have a station that's a 50,000 watt station like WABC and the call letters of WABC, that's really important because we know we have millions and millions of people listening to us daily, every 10 minutes. And if you can take a message, and it's really important, Frank and Jack and Stan, what you guys have been saying here is really it comes down to just educating, right? We need to educate everybody. And if we can educate 2 to 3 million people right now with this content, I think that makes an impact on the community. I think it makes we're doing the right thing. And it also says, get the hate out of there, understand what's going on, understand that it's not anyone who looks Asian or, like you said, that Chicano, right? As I said to you guys when I opened up today, that my mother's my grandmother's 100% Chinese, makes me quarter Chinese, right? But I probably don't look Chinese. So maybe if I was walking around, I probably wouldn't have been ridiculed, but I am part of it. So I think that's important, is the education. That's why it's important for WABC to get involved with Lunar New Year, because we want to be able to educate everybody that We're all human beings. We love New York City. We love our communities. And that's what makes America great. So that's it. That's why.
We're all New Yorkers. Anyone can come here and become a New Yorker. May I just comment? I think it's great that you mention your grandmother because there's so much diversity we don't know about. There are Latino Asians, Afro-Asians or Malaysians.
Yeah.
There are Asian people whose parents adopted them and they're Jewish, right? So there are people of Asian background in all sorts of combinations, and that is New York City. That's America. It's about change. It's about defining yourself. It's about coalition, putting together different communities, and sometimes there's some friction. I get that, but we have to work through it because if it weren't for the historic struggle of the civil rights movement trying to pursue black equality, the immigration laws wouldn't have been changed. Those happened at the same time. 1964, Civil Rights Act passed. 1965, Immigration Act passed. So you wouldn't even have Asian immigrants and Asian Americans if it weren't for the great leaders who fought for African Americans to have rights. And I know that. We were chatting just before we got started, and you asked me how I came to be where I am. The early part of my career was at Howard University. Spent a decade there. It's a historically black institution. You wouldn't expect it, but that taught me the power of these ideals and coming together. And when we come together as New Yorkers, that's what we did after 9/11. It's what we have to do now after COVID-19.
Yes. Right.
And so, in closing thoughts, and I'll start with these three, and then Mr. Lopez, if you have anything to close with, we'll close with you. But I just want you folks to know that the same way the Asian American community is here today, the Catsimatidis family, down to Mr. Lopez, and then he instructs all of us, they are trying to bring New York together. They do this with every single community in New York. The black community, the Polish community, the Italian American community, the Jewish community, the Latino community. It goes on and on and on. And so they are really trying to bring all of us together. I guess is what Mayor Dinkins, who's now deceased, used to say is the gorgeous mosaic. That's what New York is supposed to be. But let's go around the table. I guess let's start with you, Stan. Final thoughts, Lunar New Year, but what's on your mind right now, man? And you know, I'm curious as to, you are the American success story. Worked hard. Boston College or Boston University?
Boston University.
Boston University. And then Harvard University. I just want, in closing thoughts, and how hard of a struggle was that for you? Because I don't understand, you used the word earlier, emulate. And I believe that other communities, and I'm going to say it, rather than being jealous of the Asian American community, should emulate the family structure, the study habits. Don't be jealous of another community's success. Put in the hard work and do it yourself. But please, Stan, your final thoughts.
Look, I think I do think I am a product of my parents' hard work. Both of my parents came from Taiwan, and because of the Immigration Act, came over, got their masters, built a successful life and careers, and really passed their success. I'm riding on the shoulders of my parents, right? And it's so amazing that basically because I'm successful, I can honor the efforts of my parents. And especially around this time of Lunar New Year, really celebrating the Asian community, and really celebrating all of the hard work that every one of us has put into not only ourselves, our future generations, and our communities, but really, like, you know, just pushing the needle forward, especially in this time around like all of these issues that we face today. Like, look, I mean, we have an economy that's not going to be doing well, and that's going into recession. Like, you know, it's time for us to really come together, step up, and support each other. And I think that's basically my final thought.
And Mr. President, I'm going to save you for last. Let's go to Jackie, please.
So I think this is the year of rabbit, but for the Vietnamese culture, this is also the year of cat. I mean, John just left. This is actually his year. His name is John Cat. So this is actually. So what I want to say is that there's a lot of diversity within our community, and also people. I agree with what Chad said earlier. Education is really important for all the New Yorkers to learn about the Asian community, but also, I want to go back to what Mr. John Cat mentioned earlier is about the public safety. Public safety concerns everyone, whether you are black, brown, Asian, immigrant, Polish, Jewish. Public safety concerns everyone, and through the last election, the state election, we understand a lot of New Yorkers are very concerned about what is happening in our state, in our city. We must come together to do something about it. I feel like the city, especially the city, is not talking to the communities. They are doing the things themselves. They are not talking to the communities. They are not talking to the right people. They are basically following the old structure, which leads to what's happening right now. So I hope that through your radio station, through the public, we let the city know, the governor knows that they need to talk to the people who are impacted.
Yes.
Thank you. And President Wu, what I find amazing is that as the president of Queens College, you're educating white kids, you're educating black kids, you're educating Asian American kids, you're educating Latino kids. You are bringing everybody together and you are planting seeds for the future. And I thank you tremendously for your leadership, and I want your parting thoughts.
Thank you. And that's what drew me here, that in Queens, the world's borough, everyone comes and they transform themselves. This nation has always beckoned the world over with its ideals and principles. Some of you made the journey yourselves across the Pacific. If you didn't, your parents, or grandparents, or great-grandparents did. And those values are strong today as they've always been. What people may not know is that Asian Americans have been New Yorkers for a long time. You look at Manhattan, Chinatown, you look in Brooklyn, you look in Queens, you can count 2, 3, 5 generations back where folks have great-great-grandparents who started those neighborhoods. And even though there are people who shout, go back to where you came from, well, where you came from may well be Manhattan, Chinatown, or Brooklyn, or Queens, Chinatown, and it's where your grandparents first settled. Asian Americans have always been here. People are finally starting to notice. And what's great about that, it's not just the opportunity to be here. I'm so appreciative, so grateful to be on this program. But I have a message for Asian Americans, too. We have a responsibility, and that is to stand up and speak out. I know in many of our cultures, we were told, respect your elders, be quiet, don't speak unless you're spoken to, right? Every Asian culture has a proverb. There's a Japanese one. The nail that sticks up is pounded down. That's about keeping quiet and conformity. Compare that to the American adage, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. Stand up. Speak out. Our time is now.
Hey, Mr. President, I don't know. You sound like you want my job as a talk show host.
Actually, we should talk after this.
Let's switch for a day. All right?
No, thank you, Mr. President. We close. This is the final thoughts, and then we'll have some entertainment. They're ready for you from the president of this company, Mr. Chad Lopez.
Yes. So first off, Lunar New Year's, and I think the question was how do we celebrate while we're celebrating it, right? I agree with you, Frank. I agree with all of you here today. I think it's absolutely spot on that we've lost our way. When you look at these people who've done these hate crimes, I think they've lost their way. The morals, respect, values, hard work, it's gone in those cultures. It's every culture, right? And I think we're in a position right now that we need to absolutely teach our children value, morals, respect for your elders too. It's embarrassing sometimes when I get on a train.
Yes.
And I see kids just sitting and they wouldn't give. I learned you get up and you give someone that seat right. So I think we've lost that. It's important that we now get back into that because that's the only way we're going to change that. Okay. So I thank the Asian community because it's a hard-working community where all of those things exist, right? And what's happened in New York is embarrassing. But what you guys have done for New York, when I say you guys, the Asian population, is incredible. So thank you for everything, and I celebrate you guys today. Thank you.
And a round of applause again for yourselves. And thank you for attending, folks. And this has been a great experience for me. And I want you to enjoy your Lunar New Year and have a great afternoon here at WABC. Thank you.
Thank you.